You wake up one morning and realize you no longer rehearse conversations in your head. No more what I should have said looping through your mind at 2 a.m. No more imagining her reading a message from you, her eyes softening, her heart shifting. That game is over. And the silence where those thoughts used to live, that's not emptiness, that's peace. Real, unshakable peace. Because you've done the hardest thing a man can do. Not walk away from her, but walk away from the need for closure, from the illusion that if she just says the right words, everything will make sense. But life doesn't reward us with explanations. It rewards us with growth. And growth doesn't come from being understood. It comes from standing tall even when you're not. You've stopped waiting for her to see what she lost. Not because you don't care, but because you finally care more about who you're becoming than who you were when you were with her. That's the quiet revolution. The moment you stop seeking validation from the past and start building a future that doesn't require it. And that future, it's already here. In the way you carry yourself now, with less tension, more presence. In the way you speak, slower, calmer, with fewer words but more weight. In the way you spend your time, not escaping, but creating. You don't distract yourself from pain anymore because the pain is gone. Not buried, not suppressed, healed, replaced by something stronger, purpose. You train not to impress anyone, but because your body is your foundation. You work not to prove anything, but because your mission doesn't wait. You stay silent not to manipulate, but because your energy is too valuable to waste on chaos. And in that stillness you become magnetic, not because you're trying to be, but because a man who knows his worth doesn't announce it, he lives it, and people notice, they feel it, even her. If she sees you now, she won't see anger. She won't see resentment. She'll see peace. And peace is the most intimidating thing to someone who's still fighting their own battles. She might tell herself you've changed, but deep down, she knows the truth. You didn't change, you returned. You returned to yourself, to the man you were before you started shrinking to fit her world, before you made her moods your responsibility, before you mistook obsession for love. Now you love differently, not louder, not harder, deeper, with boundaries, with clarity, with self-respect as the foundation. And if love comes back, it won't be on its terms, it will be on yours. Not because you demand it, but because you've earned it. Through silence, through strength, through choosing yourself when it hurt the most. This isn't about revenge, it's about evolution. And the most powerful thing you can do right now, the final act of strength, is to stop watching for her return. Stop analyzing her actions. Stop wondering if she's thinking of you. Let her go completely, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. Because she was a chapter, a lesson, a mirror. She showed you where you were weak, where you gave too much, where you forgot yourself. And because of that, you found your way back. So thank her, silently, and keep moving. Build your life so fully, love yourself so completely, that the idea of going back to being second place feels like betrayal. Not to her, but to you. Because you are not a backup plan. You are not a comfort zone. You are not someone's option. You are a man who chose himself. And once you make that choice, truly make it, nothing can ever diminish you again. Not rejection. Not loneliness, not even love that returns. Because now, you don't follow your heart blindly. You lead it with strength, with wisdom, with unbreakable self-belief. And that is the end of suffering. That is the beginning of power. That is the life you were meant to live. There's a moment, quiet, unforced, when you realize you no longer fear her name appearing on your screen, not because you don't care, not because you're numb, because you're untouchable in a way that has nothing to do with ego and everything to do with truth. You know who you are, and no message, no voice, no memory can shake that. That's the final stage of real growth, when the past loses its power, not because you fought it, but because you outgrew it. You don't block her, you don't delete memories, you don't curse her name. You simply stop giving her space in your mind. And that silence, that's not emptiness, it's sovereignty. The moment you reclaim your mental real estate from someone who no longer lives in your life. Because here's the deepest truth about emotional freedom, it doesn't come from cutting someone off. It comes from no longer needing to. When you don't have to block, delete, or avoid, because you're so grounded in your worth that her presence or absence doesn't dictate your peace. That's power, not the loud kind, not the aggressive kind, but the quiet, unshakable kind that radiates from a man who has faced his emptiness and filled it with purpose. And now, if she reaches out, not with a test, not with a casual hey, but with real humility, real effort, you won't react, you'll respond, slowly, carefully, not out of old feelings, but out of new standards. Because you're not the same man who tolerated being an afterthought. You're the man who walked away from it, who chose solitude over compromise, who valued his energy enough to stop wasting it on someone who didn't reciprocate. So if she wants back in, she doesn't get to skip the line. She doesn't get to erase months of silence with one heartfelt message. Love isn't earned in a moment. It's proven over time, through consistency, through presence, through actions that match words. And you don't rush. You observe, you feel, you protect your peace like it's the most sacred thing you own, because it is. Because peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of self-respect. It's knowing you won't tolerate less than you deserve, not out of pride, but out of clarity. And that clarity, that's what makes you rare. In a world full of people chasing validation, you became someone who generates it from within. You stopped looking for love to fix you, because you're already whole. You stop needing attention to feel alive because your purpose fuels you. And now, if love returns, it doesn't complete you, it complements you. There's a massive difference. One comes from lack, the other from strength. And only from strength can real connection grow. Because two broken people don't heal each other, they just create more chaos. But two whole people, they build something unbreakable. So if she comes back, let it be to a man who doesn't need her, but chooses her every single day. Not out of fear of losing her, but out of love for what you're building together. Equal, respectful, deep. But even if she never reaches out again, you win, because you've already gained the one thing no one can give you, self-trust. The unshakable belief that you will always have your own back, that you won't abandon yourself for love, that you won't shrink to keep someone close. And that belief, that's the foundation of a life lived with power, dignity, and fire. You are no longer defined by who stayed or who left. You are defined by who you became in the silence. A man of depth, of discipline, of quiet strength. And from this moment forward, your life isn't shaped by loss. It's shaped by choice. The choice to stand tall, to walk forward, to love deeply, but never blindly, to give fully, but never foolishly. And to always, always choose yourself. Not as an act of rebellion, but as a promise. A promise that no matter what happens, no matter who comes or goes, you will remain loyal to the man you fought so hard to become. And that is the ultimate victory. Not her reaction, not her regret, but your evolution. And that changes everything. You walk into a room now and something is different. Not your clothes, not your words, but your energy. It's calm, grounded, unhurried. People notice. Not because you demand attention, but because peace is magnetic. And you've become a man who doesn't chase validation. You radiate it. That shift didn't happen overnight. It happened in the quiet mornings when you chose the gym over scrolling, in the late nights when you sat with your pain instead of numbing it, in the moments you wanted to text her just to see if she'd reply, and you didn't. You didn't win a battle with her. You won a war within yourself. And that's where real power is forged. Not in drama, not in revenge, not in making someone miss you, but in the daily choice to respect yourself more than you fear loneliness. Because loneliness, it's not your enemy, it's your teacher. It sits with you in the silence and asks the hard questions. Who are you when no one's watching? What do you stand for? What kind of man do you want to be? Not when love is easy, but when it's gone. And you answered, not with words, with action, with discipline, with the courage to walk away from what was familiar so you could move toward what was true. Now, when love shows up, whether it's her or someone new, you don't fall, you decide, you assess, you protect your inner world like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is. No one can give you peace. No one can hand you confidence. They can only reflect back what you've already built. And if someone doesn't see your worth, it's not because you're lacking, it's because they're limited. Your value doesn't decrease because someone failed to recognize it. It only increases because you kept choosing it, even when no one else did. That's the invisible strength that changes lives, not loud declarations, not dramatic exits, but the quiet, relentless commitment to never betray yourself again. To never go back to begging for love that should have been freely given, to never shrink just to keep someone close. Because you've seen what that costs. You've felt the weight of living small for someone who took you for granted. And you've sworn, deep in your bones, that it will never happen again. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. So if she comes back, she doesn't return to a man waiting at the door. She returns to one who's already moved forward, one who doesn't panic at her presence, one who doesn't lose his center when she smiles at him the way she used to, because he's been rebuilt on a foundation of self-respect, not need. And that changes everything. Love can no longer control him, because he's no longer afraid of losing it. He gives, but only from overflow, not emptiness. He stays, but only where he's valued. He forgives, but only when there's real change, not just words. And if she can't meet that standard, he walks again. And this time, it's even easier. Because he knows, deep in his soul, that peace is non-negotiable. And no amount of love, no amount of history, no amount of what we used to be is worth your inner calm. Nothing is. So you keep building, keep growing, keep becoming, not for her, not for anyone, but for the man you see in the mirror, the one who didn't break, the one who endured, the one who chose himself again and again, even when it hurt. And in that choice, you've become something rare, a man of depth, of integrity, of quiet, unshakable strength. And from this moment forward, your life isn't shaped by who loves you. It's shaped by who you are. Strong, clear, free, and finally, at peace. There's a stillness in you now that no chaos can break. Not her silence, not her return, not the memory of her voice saying your name in that soft, familiar way. You feel it, but you don't fall, because you've built something deeper than emotion. You've built identity. You are no longer the man who defined himself by her attention. You are the man who redefined himself by his actions. By the mornings he got up even when his heart was heavy. By the nights he stayed offline when every fiber wanted to reach out. By the choices he made when no one was watching, and no one would ever know. That's integrity. Not doing the right thing when it's easy, but doing it when it's hard, when it hurts, when the reward isn't immediate. And that's what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Not talent, not luck, not charm. It's consistency in the unseen. It's showing up for yourself when you're broken. It's treating your future self like someone you deeply love and refusing to betray him. And now when you look in the mirror, you don't search for approval. You give it, you nod, you say, you did good. Not because everything worked out, but because you stayed true. In a world that rewards speed, you chose depth. In a world that glorifies reaction, you mastered restraint. In a world where most men chase love like it's a prize, you became the prize. Not by begging to be seen, but by becoming someone worth seeing. And that transformation, it didn't come from her absence. It came from your presence to yourself, to your pain, to your purpose. You stopped running from the silence and started living in it. And in that silence, you heard the truth. You were never broken. You were buried under years of compromise, under layers of people-pleasing, under the false belief that love meant sacrifice. But you weren't meant to shrink for love. You were meant to grow with it. And if it doesn't grow you, it's not love. It's limitation. It's fear. It's comfort disguised as connection. Real love doesn't make you beg for attention. It makes you feel safe to be silent. It doesn't make you anxious when she's busy. It makes you trust the bond so deeply that space doesn't threaten it. And if what you had didn't feel like that, then losing it wasn't a tragedy. It was a rescue, a painful, necessary extraction from a life that was slowly dimming your light. And now you shine. Not because you're trying to, but because you're no longer blocking your own light. You don't perform. You don't impress. You simply exist, fully, honestly, powerfully. And that's when real attraction begins. Not the kind that comes from chasing, but the kind that comes from being. People feel it. They don't always understand it, but they sense the strength, the calm, the unshakable core. And if she returns, truly returns, not out of fear or nostalgia, but with humility and effort, you won't rush. You won't forget. You won't erase the past. But you will observe. You will feel. You will protect your peace like a lion guards its den. Because you've learned the most important lesson of all. Love should never cost your self-respect. Never. Not once. Not even for the person you loved the most. So you keep moving. Keep building, keep choosing yourself, not as a one-time decision, but as a daily practice. And in that practice, you become untouchable. Not because you're closed off, but because you're so full, so grounded, so alive, that no one can make you feel small again. This is your life now, strong, clear, free, and finally, your own. You wake up one morning and realize you no longer carry the weight of her absence like a punishment. It's not gone. The memory, the history, the moments that once meant everything. But it's no longer heavy. It's just there like an old photograph tucked in a drawer. Respected, remembered. but no longer defining you. And that lightness, that's freedom. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from integrating. You've taken the pain, the lessons, the scars, and you've woven them into who you are. Not as wounds, but as wisdom. Every silent night, every unanswered text, every moment you chose yourself over desperation. They weren't losses. They were deposits, investments in a future you couldn't see at the time, but you trusted it anyway. And now that future is here. You walk differently, speak slower, listen deeper. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you've stopped performing. You're no longer acting the role of the loyal lover, the patient partner, the man who waits. You're living as the man who knows his worth, not as a claim, but as a fact. And facts don't need to be defended. They simply exist, like gravity, like breath, like the rising sun. You don't have to prove you've changed. You don't have to show her what she lost. Because real transformation isn't loud. It's quiet. It's in the way you don't flinch when someone doesn't respond, in the way you don't chase when someone pulls away, in the way you stay calm when love feels uncertain. That calm, that's power. Not brute force, not aggression, but the deep, unshakable strength of a man who has faced his emptiness and filled it with purpose. And now, if she sees you, she won't see bitterness. She won't see a man broken by rejection. She'll see one rebuilt by self-respect. And that's what hits hardest, not your absence, but your presence, the way you carry yourself now, the way you speak with certainty, not need, the way you give space without fear. Because you've learned the most powerful truth in love, security isn't something you get from someone else. It's something you carry within. And when you have it, you don't panic when they're late. You don't obsess over their words. You don't collapse when they pull away. You simply stay centered, grounded, whole. And that stability, that's what creates real connection. Not need, not control, but peace. So if she returns, not to test you, not to regain control, but to truly reconnect, you won't rush, you won't fall, you'll observe, you'll feel, you'll protect your energy like it's the last flame in a storm, because you know now, peace is rare. And once you've tasted it, you'll never trade it for the illusion of love again. You'll only give your heart to someone who doesn't make you lose yourself, to someone who doesn't require you to shrink, to someone who sees your strength not as a threat, but as a gift. And if that person never comes, you're still winning, because you've already found the one relationship that matters most, the one with yourself. You trust you honor you stand by you, even when it's hard. And that loyalty, that's the foundation of everything, of love, of success, of a life lived with fire and truth. So keep going, keep choosing yourself, keep building, keep walking forward, not away from her, but toward you. Because the man you're becoming, he's not waiting for love to save him. He's already saved himself. And from this moment on, your life isn't shaped by who stays or leaves. It's shaped by who you decide to be every single day, strong, clear, free, and finally, at peace with the truth. You were never lost. You were just becoming. There's a moment, unannounced, quiet, when you realize you no longer compare yourself to who you were when you were with her. You don't measure your progress by how much you've moved on. You don't ask, am I over her yet? Because that question doesn't exist in your mind anymore. It's been replaced by something deeper, who am I becoming? And that shift, subtle, silent, seismic, is the final sign of true freedom. Not that you forgot. Not that you don't remember the love, the connection, the moments that once lit you up, but that those memories no longer hold power over your present. They don't dictate your mood. They don't pull you back into old patterns. They don't make you question your worth when silence stretches too long. Because you've stopped looking for love to confirm your value. You've started living in a way that proves it. Every morning you rise without checking your phone. Every decision you make from a place of clarity, not fear. Every time you choose growth over comfort, peace over drama, self-respect over temporary connection, you reaffirm who you are. And that identity is no longer fragile. It's forged in the fire of solitude, in the weight of unanswered questions, in the courage to walk away from something familiar just to find something true. You didn't become strong because the pain was small. You became strong because you kept going even when it was crushing. When the nights were long, when the silence screamed, when every instinct told you to text, to call, to beg for just one sign that you still mattered. And you didn't. You stayed with yourself in the dark. And that's where the real transformation happened. Not in the grand gestures, not in the dramatic exits, but in the thousand small choices, each one saying, I am worth more than this. And now when you move through the world, people feel it. They don't always know why, but they sense it. Your calm, your depth, your quiet confidence. You don't need to speak to command presence. You don't need attention to feel alive, because your energy comes from within, not from what others give you, but from what you've built. And that's the rarest kind of strength, the kind that doesn't react, the kind that responds with wisdom, with patience, with unshakable boundaries. So if she returns, not to manipulate, not to test, but to truly reconnect, you won't fall into old patterns. You won't rush. You won't forget. You won't let emotion override judgment, because you've learned the hardest lesson. Love without consistency is just nostalgia, and you're not interested in reliving the past. You're focused on building a future, one where you're not an option, but a priority. One where your peace is protected, not compromised. One where love isn't something you beg for, but something you choose daily from a place of strength. And if she can't meet that standard, you walk again. And this time it's easier, not because you don't care, but because you care too much for yourself to go back to being taken for granted. You've tasted what it feels like to live with integrity, to move through the world as a man who doesn't need validation to stand tall. And you'll never trade that for the illusion of love again. So you keep building, keep growing, keep showing up, not for her, not for anyone, but for the man you see in the mirror, the one who didn't break, the one who endured, the one who chose himself again and again, even when it felt like no one else would. And in that choice, you've become something undeniable, a man of depth, of discipline, of quiet, unshakable power. And from this moment forward, your life isn't shaped by who loves you. It's shaped by who you are, strong, clear, free. And finally, at peace with the truth, you were never lost. You were just becoming the man you were always meant to be. You sit with your coffee one morning, the world still quiet, the sky just beginning to lighten, and it hits you. You're not waiting anymore. Not for her message, not for closure, not for the moment she finally sees what she lost. That chapter has closed not with a bang, not with a final word, but with the silent certainty that you've moved on. Not just from her, but from the version of yourself that needed her to feel complete. And that's the deepest victory. Because the pain wasn't in losing her, it was in losing you, in forgetting who you were when no one was watching, in trading your peace for the illusion of connection, in believing that love meant giving everything, even when you got nothing in return. But now you know better. You know that real love doesn't drain you. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't leave you feeling small just to make space for someone else's ego. Real love expands you. It makes you stronger, more grounded, more alive. And if what you had didn't feel like that, then letting go wasn't failure. It was self-preservation. It was the moment you chose survival, not just of your heart, but of your soul. And in that choice, you became something rare, a man who honors his boundaries not as walls, but as sacred ground. You don't shut people out. You simply don't let just anyone in. Your energy is precious. Your time is limited. Your peace is non-negotiable. And you protect all three, not out of pride, but out of respect. Respect for the man who showed up every day, even when no one noticed. Respect for the man who kept walking, even when his legs were weak. Respect for the man who could have broken, but chose to rebuild instead. And now, when you move through life, you do it with a different rhythm. Slower, clearer, more intentional. You don't rush into relationships. You don't fall fast. You observe, you feel, you wait, not because you're afraid, but because you've learned the cost of moving too quickly. You've paid it. In loneliness, in heartbreak, in wasted years, and you're not paying it again. So you stay grounded, you stay centered, you stay true. And if love comes, real love, deep love, balanced love, it won't find you desperate or searching. It will find you whole, already full, already at peace. And that's the only place from which real connection can grow, not from need, not from lack, but from overflow. From strength, from a man who no longer looks for someone to complete him because he's already complete. And if she returns with humility, with effort, with real change, you won't reject her out of spite. You won't punish her for the past, but you won't forget it either. Trust isn't rebuilt with words, it's rebuilt with time, with consistency, with actions that match promises. And you'll give her the chance, not because you need her, but because you're secure enough to offer fairness. But you'll also be ready to walk because you're strong enough to live without her. And that balance, that's power, not control, not coldness, but the quiet confidence of a man who knows his worth and refuses to compromise it for anything less than mutual respect, mutual growth, mutual fire. So keep going. Keep choosing yourself. Keep building a life so full, so meaningful, so aligned with truth that the past doesn't even whisper anymore. Because you're not just moving on, you're moving up into the man you were always meant to be, strong, clear, free, and finally, at peace. There's a quiet morning when you realize you no longer rehearse the words you wish you'd said. You don't lie awake replaying the final conversation, twisting it, wishing you'd been sharper, kinder, stronger. That loop has stopped, not because you've forgotten, but because it no longer matters. The past has lost its grip, not through force, not through denial, but through the steady, silent power of becoming someone the old version of you could never have understood. You used to think healing meant getting over her. Now you know it meant coming back to you. And that return, slow, painful, relentless, changed everything, because you didn't just walk away from a relationship. You walked into yourself, into the man who doesn't need validation to stand tall, the man who can sit in silence without feeling empty, the man who doesn't panic when love feels uncertain, because his foundation isn't built on emotion, but on self-trust. And that trust, that's the rarest thing in the world, more valuable than attention, more powerful than passion. It's the quiet certainty that no matter what happens, whether she returns or fades forever, you will always have your own back. You will always choose what's right over what's easy. You will always protect your peace like it's the last flame in a storm. And that protection isn't selfish. It's sacred. Because peace isn't weakness. It's power. It's the ability to stay calm when others are chaotic, to stay grounded when others are desperate, to stay silent when others are screaming for attention. And in that stillness, you become magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because a man who knows himself, who respects himself, is impossible to ignore. So if she sees you now, she won't see the man who used to light up at her message. She'll see one who doesn't flinch at her silence, one who doesn't rush to respond, or one who lives a life so full, so purposeful, so undisturbed, that her presence or absence no longer shifts his center. And that's the ultimate shift. Not that you stopped loving her, but that you started loving yourself more. And once that balance tips, once your own worth becomes the highest law, nothing can break you the same way again. You can lose someone you care about and still stand tall, not because you don't feel it, but because you refuse to let pain define you. You let it refine you. You let it teach you. You let it strengthen the parts of you that once gave too much, waited too long, hoped too hard. And now when love comes, whether it's her or someone new, you don't fall into it. You step into it with eyes open, with boundaries clear, with standards unshaken. You don't ignore red flags. You don't excuse disrespect. You don't convince yourself that maybe next time will be different. Because you've learned the deepest truth, patterns don't change without pain. And real change doesn't come from a moment of regret. It comes from consistent action over time. So you wait, not passively, but powerfully. With your life moving forward, your purpose growing, your strength deepening while you observe. You give nothing freely that was once taken for granted. Your attention, your loyalty, your heart, they are earned, not begged for. And if she wants back in, she doesn't get to skip the line. She doesn't get to erase the past with a single heartfelt message. She proves herself, day after day, and if she can't, you keep walking. Because you've already tasted what it feels like to live with self-respect, and you'll never trade that for the illusion of love again. So you rise, you build, you grow. Not for her, not for anyone, but for the man you see in the mirror, the one who didn't break, the one who chose himself again and again, even when it hurt. And in that choice, you become unshakable, strong, clear, free, and finally, at peace. There's a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when you realize you no longer flinch at the thought of her moving on. Not because you don't care, not because your heart is dead, but because it's alive, in a way that no longer depends on her choices. You can picture her laughing with someone new, sharing moments you once held sacred, and instead of rage or despair, you feel something unexpected, peace, not indifference. Peace. Because you've stopped confusing love with ownership. You've stopped believing that someone's presence in your past means they deserve a permanent place in your future. And that clarity, that's the final release. The last chain breaking, the moment you stop guarding a memory like it's a possession and start honoring it like a chapter that served its purpose. You loved her, deeply, fully. And that love wasn't wasted, it was real, it mattered. But it wasn't yours to hold on to forever. Some loves aren't meant to last, they're meant to teach, to reveal your weaknesses, to expose your patterns, to show you where you gave too much, where you stayed too long, where you confused obsession with devotion. And now, because of that love, because of that pain, you're not broken, you're awake, wide awake. And that awareness is your greatest power, because you don't repeat the same mistakes, you don't fall for the same illusions, you don't mistake intensity for intimacy, you don't confuse need for connection. You see it now. The subtle signs, the slow erosion of self, the way you once bent yourself into shapes just to fit someone else's world. And you won't do it again. Not for her, not for anyone. Because you've tasted what it feels like to stand tall in your truth. And nothing feels better than that. So when you move through life now, you do it with quiet confidence, not arrogance, not pride, but the unshakable knowing that you will never betray yourself for love again. You will never shrink to keep someone close. You will never beg for attention that should have been freely given. And if someone can't meet you at that level, with honesty, with consistency, with mutual respect, you walk, without drama, without resentment, without looking back, because you've already built a life worth walking toward. One where your mornings are yours, your goals are clear, your energy is protected, and your heart, it's not locked away, it's guarded. Not by fear, but by wisdom. You don't shut love out. You simply let it in, slowly, carefully, only when it proves itself worthy. And if she returns, not to test you, not to regain control, but to truly grow, you won't reject her out of bitterness. You'll meet her with calm, with clarity, with boundaries that don't waver. But you won't forget. You won't pretend the past didn't happen. Trust isn't rebuilt in a conversation, it's rebuilt in silence, in consistency. In the 1,000 small moments where she chooses you. Not when it's easy, but when it's hard. And if she can't do that, you keep moving, because you've already found what you were searching for, not in her, not in anyone else, but in yourself. You found the one relationship that changes everything, the one where you finally become your own priority, where you stop sacrificing your peace for the illusion of love, where you stop measuring your worth by someone else's attention, where you stop waiting for someone to see you and start living in a way that proves you see yourself. And from this moment forward, your life isn't shaped by who stays or leaves. It's shaped by who you choose to be every single day. Strong, clear, free, and finally, at peace. There's a morning when you realize you no longer measure your worth by the silence on your phone. You don't wake up scanning for unread messages. You don't check your social media hoping she's seen your story. That hunger, that quiet desperation for a sign that you still matter to her, is gone, not buried, not suppressed, healed, and in its place, a deep, unshakable sense of wholeness. You don't need her to validate your value because you've stopped outsourcing your self-worth. You've brought it home, to yourself. And that homecoming, silent, powerful, complete, is the moment everything changes, because you finally understand love should never feel like begging. It should feel like peace, like safety, like two people choosing each other every single day, without fear, without games, without one person always doing the emotional labor. And if what you had didn't feel like that, then letting go wasn't loss. It was liberation. The moment you stopped clinging to a version of love that required you to lose yourself and chose a life where you could finally be whole. Now, when you walk through the world, you do it differently. Not with a mission to prove anything, not with the weight of past rejection pressing on your shoulders, but with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you faced the darkest parts of yourself and didn't run. You stayed. You felt the pain. You sat in the loneliness. You fought the urge to beg, to plead, to collapse into old patterns. And you won, not by making her miss you, but by becoming someone even you could finally respect. That's the real victory. Not her reaction, not her regret, but your transformation. The man who used to panic when she didn't reply now doesn't even pause when her name appears. Not out of coldness, but out of clarity. He knows his value isn't determined by her attention. He knows peace is more important than connection. He knows that if love returns, it must be equal, not one-sided, not conditional, not built on fear. And if it's not, He walks, again. And this time, it's not painful, it's peaceful. Because you've built a life so strong, so full, so aligned with your truth, that walking away from what's wrong feels better than staying in what's familiar. You don't need her to come back to feel complete. You don't need anyone to complete you, because you already are, whole, grounded, free. And that freedom, that's contagious. People feel it. They don't always understand it, but they sense it. Your calm, your depth, your quiet strength. You don't have to speak to command presence. You don't have to chase to be seen. Because a man who has mastered himself is the most magnetic force in the world. And if she returns with humility, with effort, with real change, you won't reject her out of pride. You'll observe. You'll feel. You'll protect your peace like it's the most sacred thing you own, because it is. And you'll give her the chance, not because you need her, but because you're secure enough to be fair. But you won't forget. You won't erase the past. Trust isn't rebuilt in a single moment. It's earned in the daily choice to show up, to be consistent, to prove through action that you've changed. And if she can't do that, you keep moving, because you've already found what you were searching for. Not in her, not in anyone else, but in the quiet mornings, the long walks, the hard decisions, the moments you chose yourself when it would have been easier to break. You found the one truth that changes everything. You were never broken. You were just asleep. And now you're awake, fully, completely. And from this moment forward, your life isn't shaped by who loves you. It's shaped by who you've become. Strong, clear, free, and finally, at peace.